Steel City Sports back here. So yesterday I made a video talking about my confidence level for each of the teams that have already clinched a playoff spot. So in today's video, we're going to take a look at the AFC teams that just take a look at their scenarios, take a look at what they need to get into the playoffs because they're still heading into Week 18. There's still 3 spots open for the playoffs. We obviously already have 4 teams that have clinched. If you want to hear my opinion on the teams already in, go ahead and listen to yesterday's video. Obviously, the Ravens, they've already clinched the 1 seed. They have the AFC North locked down. The Chiefs, they've already won the AFC West no matter what. The Dolphins, we're going to talk about them. We're kind of waiting to see where the Dolphins are going to go in terms of are they going to be the division winner if they beat the Bills, or, which means they'll host a playoff game, or are they going to get knocked down to the wild card spot with a loss to the Bills? And that'll mean, obviously, they're going on the road in the playoffs, which makes, a world of a difference. And then the last team that's already clinched is the Browns, which hold a wild card spot, obviously, at 11-5. And we talked about all those teams in yesterday's video. If you want to hear my thoughts on those teams, go listen to that. But there's 3 spots still left. And we have here 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 teams here. So only half of them are going to make it based on the results of this upcoming week. So let's dive into the teams now. So if you saw yesterday's video, I basically used a temperature scale to kind of gauge where my opinions were with the teams, whether it was cold, lukewarm, or hot. As for this video, we're just going to do 1 through 5 based on how confident I am that they're going to make the playoffs. 1 being, I don't think they're going to make it in. 5 being, they are going to make it in. So the Bills, the first team here, I think they're probably the most intriguing team, being that out of these 6 teams, they definitely had the highest expectations going into this season. I had them as a contender going into the year. I'm going to put them at a 4. I'm heavily confident that they will make it in. I'm not going to quite put it at a 5 just because if they lose, it's going to be an extremely difficult path. So let's just take a look at the different scenarios. So the most ideal situation for the Bills is that they just beat the Dolphins. And if they do that, they will clinch the AFC East and obviously host a playoff game, which will be huge. And that's actually what I'm predicting to happen. I think the Bills will beat the Dolphins for a multitude of reasons. And again, we talked about that a lot in yesterday's video about how the Dolphins are essentially crumbling at the worst time. Their injuries, specifically on defense, are piling up in their pass rush. Tyreek Hill is banged up. And I just don't really have a lot of confidence in the Dolphins. So I'm pretty confident that'll happen. However, if they lose to the Dolphins, that's where things, start to become a little tricky, because they can get a playoff berth in one scenario if they tie with the Dolphins. I don't see that happening because ties obviously are pretty rare. We didn't have any ties this NFL season. Another scenario, they'll clinch the playoff berth if the Steelers lose or tie. I think the Steelers are going to win that game, so I don't think that's very likely. Another one, a playoff berth if the Jags lose or tie. Again, I don't see that very likely because I think the Jags are going to beat the Titans. And their last chance would be a playoff berth if the Texans and the Colts game result in a tie. And I think that is pretty much a 0% chance of that scenario happening. So the Bills, this is like a must-win game because if they lose, they don't control their destiny. And there's just too many... you're really relying on losses and ties. I don't like that. So I think that they're extremely motivated, obviously, to go out there and win. And I think that they will beat the Dolphins. I'm pretty confident they'll make the playoffs. So our next team is the Houston Texans, and they actually have 3 different ways to make the playoffs. And I would probably put my confidence level at a 3 out of 5 with Houston. Let's take a look at their scenarios. They can actually clinch the AFC South if they win. And then the Jags have to lose or tie versus the Titans. So as I said earlier, I don't think that that's going to happen because I think the Jags are going to win. I think the Jags will take the division. They're going to beat the Titans. Their next scenario, which I think is the most likely outcome for the Texans, is they just have to beat the Colts and they make it in as a wild card. I think that is very likely to happen. I think that's obviously a playoff game right there because whoever wins that one basically gets in. So I'm really excited to see that. And I would take Houston in that game just because I trust C.J. Stroud more than I trust Gardner Minshew. And then their last scenario would be if they tie, the Jags would have to lose, and then the Steelers would have to lose or tie. So that last scenario, basically, I would say 0% shot of that happening. So yeah, they control their own destiny. They just have to beat the Colts and they're in. So staying in division, the next team is the Colts, and they actually have two different scenarios in which they can clinch the division. And the first one being they have to beat the Texans, and then the Jacksonville game, the Jags have to lose or tie. So I don't see that one happening again. You're probably going to hear me sound like a broken record in this just because these games are so interlocked. So it's like they all kind of connect. I think the Jags are going to win that game, so I think that scenario's out. Their other scenario would be if they tie and the Jags lose. So again, I don't see that one happening. For just a playoff berth, though, like we just said with the Houston game, they just have to beat the Texans. If they beat the Texans, they're in as a wild card team. Their other scenario would be if they tie and then the Steelers lose or tie. So I don't think that one's happening. I think the only realistic scenario for the Colts to get into the playoffs is if they just straight up beat the Texans. That is their most likely way, and I guess I'll put it at a 3 as well because they control their destiny. If they beat Houston, although I think Houston's going to win that game probably just comes down to a coin flip. I haven't looked at the line. It's probably just like 3 to the home team. So, yeah, I think, like I said earlier, that's going to be a great game. I can't wait to see that because that is a playoff game. So next up, we have Jacksonville, probably my most disappointing team this season because I actually predicted the Jags to be the 1 seed this year, and it actually looked like a good prediction not that long ago. They were 8-3, and then I don't know what the hell happened. They just kind of fell off of a cliff. Now they're sitting at 9-7, and there's a scenario where they missed the playoffs this year. So I don't know. Again, we're going to cover each team in the offseason and kind of do a season review of each team, so we can talk about the Jags more then. But just looking at their playoff scenarios, their most ideal one, of course, is they just beat the Titans. If they beat the Titans, they will clinch the AFC South and, of course, host a playoff game. I think that's going to happen. I know that the Titans, they're not going to just give the Jags this game. They're obviously going to play their guys. They're going to be competitive. But I think Jacksonville in a must-win situation. I think, obviously, I'm taking Trevor Lawrence over Tannehill or Levis. I don't know who's starting for Tennessee anymore. To just make there's another division. There's another way they can get the division is if they tie and then the Colts and Texan game results in a tie. I don't see that happening. To get a playoff berth, though, not the division, just a playoff berth for a wild card spot, they would have to tie against the Titans, and then the Steelers would have to lose or tie. I don't see that happening. And then their last scenario would be the Steelers lose, the Broncos lose or tie, and then the Houston and Indy game doesn't end in a tie. So throw that out because that's just too many teams that need to go in their favor. So I think this really comes down for the Jags to you got to beat the Titans. That's all it is. I mean, you control your own destiny, so you got to beat the Titans. I would put my confidence at a 4 out of 5. I think that they are going to beat the Titans and win the AFC South. And for the only team on this list that has already clinched a playoff spot, they're obviously just playing to see if they win the division or if they're going to be a wild card team. And we already talked about this when we talked about the Bills. I think they're going to lose against the Bills, which means they will be a wild card team. I think that they're just kind of imploding at the worst time. They have key defensive injuries with Phillips and now Chubb. Tyreek Hill, the past 2 or 3 games now, has not really looked at anywhere near 100%. So I do have major concerns for Miami. Not saying that they can't win a playoff game. I think it's very matchup dependent on if they're getting a win in the playoffs, but I do think that they're going to lose to Buffalo. And I saved the best for last, the Pittsburgh Steelers, the only team on here that does not control their destiny. Even if they win, they're not guaranteed a playoff spot, which is extremely frustrating. For the fact that you look back, we were, 7-3 or 7-4? It was 7-4. And our next 2 games were the Cardinals and the Patriots, both games at home, and we went on to lose both those games. I think the fact that Mike Tomlin chose to play Mitch Trubisky over Mason Rudolph costed us a playoff berth. I really do believe that. And even, like I said, even if we win and get to 10 wins, we're not guaranteed a spot. So let's take a look at the scenarios. So the first one is we would have to win, obviously, and then the Bills would have to lose. So as I said countless times in this video already, I think the Bills are going to win, so I don't see that as likely, although that one is probably the most likely one, I think, out of these scenarios, because although I think the Bills are going to win, I'm not saying they're going to, I'm not saying it's going to be an easy game for the Bills. You know, the Dolphins can still certainly win that game. So that's probably the most likely scenario. So obviously, I'm a massive Dolphins fan this week. The second scenario would be we'd win, and then Jacksonville would have to lose or tie against the Titans. Again, I think Jacksonville is going to smoke the Titans. I don't think that one's going to be very competitive. And then the last one I put down here is we'd have to win, and then the Colts-Texans game would have to result in a tie. As I said earlier, I don't see a tie happening. We haven't had a single tie this season. And there are a couple other scenarios, but they just got too silly. Like, they need like 5 different teams for help, so I didn't even bother writing them down. So I'm going to put my confidence level at a 2 out of 5, because even if they win, which isn't even a guarantee, like everyone's penciling in this win against the Ravens, which they obviously on paper should beat the Ravens, who's resting all their starters, but on paper we should have beat the Cardinals. On paper we should have beat the Patriots. So I'm not even sure we're guaranteed that win against the Ravens. So it is going to be frustrating if we win that game and then fail to make the playoffs as a 10-win team. So stay tuned, obviously, for more playoff coverage as we get the actual seeding and the bracket finally formed. We're going to be doing countless breakdown and prediction videos for the playoffs. I cannot wait, so stay tuned for that. And if you made it this far, I really appreciate it. Go ahead and leave a like and subscribe.